My name is Teddy Lee, and I'm the game designer at Cellador Games, where we're currently working on Rogue Legacy 2.
So we're talking to you just as the Drifting Worlds update released. So I want to start with just saying getting through the castle in Rogue Legacy 2 is a challenge in itself. But with the Drifting Worlds update, you've added the Sun Tower, where you're calling it the most challenging biome to date. So what can players expect to find in the Sun Tower?
So the Sun Tower is the completely vertical biome. So you go upwards, and it really pushes all of the mobility options that we've added to Rogue Legacy 2. So that's something that we really wanted to emphasize. So just getting it to work is pretty complicated because we're more or less creating a procedural platformer, right? And the meshing and everything was just a lot of problems that needed to be solved.
So I love the two new classes that you've added. Like, you've added the Lancer and you've added the Boxer. So how did you come up with these two new classes, and what is the process for just coming up with classes in Rogue Legacy 2 in general?
So it's pretty lackadaisical. Near the beginning of development, we just asked everybody on the team, "Can you pitch one class that you liked in the game?" And then we kind of worked from there because, while we were making the game, we're still kind of trying to figure it out and see what works. So it's always kind of experimental. So my brother wanted the Boxer. The Lancer was in just because it was actually going to be cut, and then we accidentally released the Lance weapon in one of the patches, so people were playing with it, and they were kind of excited by how it was playing. We're like, okay, we're going to try and put in the effort to finish that off. But a lot of the classes, we hit the archetypes like mage, assassin, whatever. But the classes like the ranger, the chef, and another future class were all just things pitched by the team.
And I've loved those classes, like those kind of outside the box choices. Like, you talked about the chef, and we're talking about the Boxer. Are there any other kind of oddball ideas that you're throwing out there for future classes?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we had the gunslinger. That one was really well received, and we like that. But we do have another super wacky class that's coming out, but I don't want to say anything just yet because if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, right? And so we're still working on it. But I think it will work out. It's not fourth wall breaking as the Boxer, but it's definitely a silly class which we enjoy.
You've made a Deadpool class?
Yeah, sure.
It's got to be fun, right? That's the rule, Teddy. If it's not fun to play, it may be sound like a cool idea or a fun concept, but if it doesn't execute, well, it just gets scrapped.
Yeah, and one thing we really wanted to emphasize that they had to have depth, right? So if a class just ended up, having one attack which just did everything, then we wouldn't put it in, right? Because we really want the players to be utilizing everything. We want players to be able to have a favorite class and to have enough of a skill ceiling for them to keep progressing with it over multiple hours.
What are the challenges in keeping all these classes balanced? Because I know that some of the classes have had some huge changes over the course of the past few patches.
Yeah. So the difficulty part is one, ensuring that they're all viable in the platform, right? So one of the big problems we had with the Lancer was that we wanted to do a charge up and we wanted him to dash across the screen, but just getting him to feel right in this type of in Rogue Legacy 2 was a big problem. The only way we were able to solve it was to completely revamp his dash so that you could move vertically. But in terms of breaking the game, it's not too hard because we knew that in order to allow players to have a wild array of attack styles, or different attack types, we really had to triple down at the beginning of the game on mobility. That way, no matter how lopsided or awkward or different an attack is, as long as you have that core mobility of the dash and the void dashing and the double jumping and the resonant kicking, which we added to the game, right? That'll all circumvent whatever we really do to the combat system.
And traits have been one of the defining ideas of Rogue Legacy, and I wanted to ask, what is the process for pitching trait ideas, and is the plan to keep adding traits even after launch?
I think we'll definitely be adding some more stuff after launch, just not like new biomes or anything, right? But yeah, we totally do plan to put in a bit more love after the game releases. Traits are definitely one of the hardest things to add to the game. We do know it's a very like I'd say fragile ground, right? Because we don't want to. Our goal with the traits is always to be like anyone can be a hero, right? So we don't want to punch down or anything, so everything that we do on the trait side goes through a lot of discussion, right? And the other problem with traits, and this is like excluding the political stuff, is they're kind of meshing in with how relics work in the game, right? So relics are power-ups that you get, which will change your run during a run, right? And traits kind of do the same thing. So the delineation of what a trait does and what a relic does and which category we decide to put them into, right? That becomes a whole problem into itself, which is actually why like whenever we release an update, maybe we put in like 1 or 2 traits, but then there's like 10 or 12 relics. We definitely need to start veering over towards the trait system because a lot of people enjoy it. A lot of people, we get a lot of mail from people who might have something like we had somebody who had I can't remember the terms. I don't want to say, but people really enjoy like seeing it, like especially when those certain traits they have in real life, right? It's just enjoyable to have those things. So we want to keep expanding on it, but yeah, it's very tough. Long buzz into it, it's very tough.
I love the new additions of the Fabled weapons. So what made you want to add well, first of all, can you explain what the Fabled weapons are? And secondly, like what made you want to add this idea to the game? Like, can players expect to see more of them in future patches?
Yeah, so Fabled weapons are new weapons that you find in these special rooms called curio shops, and you can pick them up and it changes your primary weapon to something that's like super wild. And it actually came about because we do experiment with a lot of weapons in the game. You can actually see like the original launch trailer, like, oh, look at all these weapons you have, and like 3 of them aren't even in the game anymore, right? Just because they weren't back to the original thing with classes, they didn't have enough depth to merit an entire class design, right? So we're like, oh, well, we've got all these things. Well, could we use them? Because they are kind of like just time that gets thrown out otherwise, right? And since we had this whole system like 75% of the way there, we're like, if we do that extra 25%, we can build a system where we can put in all of these weapons that weren't gonna ever reach the game anyways in a class, just because they weren't like finalized. Like the chakra was going to be a class, but it's too shallow, and now that's going to become a fabled weapon later on. And like the hammer, the spinning axe where you spin forever, that was a bug in the initial launch, and it was so good that we just like we're like, oh, let's turn this bug into an actual weapon, and then put it in.
The early access approach has allowed you to take in player feedback like a lot more than you were able to in the last game. So I do want to ask, is there a specific idea, mechanic, or what have you that you've adjusted the most based on player feedback?
100% would be the relic system. So when we made relics, we wanted to stay true to Rogue Legacy, which was a thing which we call mandatory floor clearing in a lot of roguelikes, where it's like, oh, you can go down to the next floor, but if you don't clear out everything, you're going to be 200 powered, right? So then it just becomes like artificial decision making, where if you're just making the wrong decision if you don't do that. But relics kind of screw it up for Rogue because everybody wants it, but if we add it, then you have to clear out the entire castle before people think they have a chance against bosses and stuff like that. And the way we did that is we took away your max HP every time you picked up a relic. And we're like, oh yeah, this is great. It's balanced. People have a choice. They don't have to take relics. They don't have to clear bosses because they can see that there's a trade-off. But what happened is that people just weren't taking relics at all. And like the feedback was like super immediate, and it just made us go, okay, well, let's recall the entire system. And what we came up with, which was like 100% based on how the users were reacting and what they wanted. They were saying it in different ways, right? Like they're like, oh, I just wish they weren't costing, or like the cost was less. But the core problem was like just loop max HP, right? But we didn't want to introduce the other problem of now everybody feel like they have to get all the relics. So the result system came in, and yeah, everybody really liked it. And it also solved another problem for us, which was incidental, which is that all the games we make are way too hard, right? And I was like, oh, if we balance the relics so that it's not as punishing, it's still punishing, but now I can now assume that people will have 2 or 3 relics in like a run, so it's not too much. And we actually put in a system called twin relics to speed it up even further, where a relic can be like doubled. That way you can just get 1 room and already hit your max relic stacks, and then you can just play however you want. You don't have to worry. Yeah, we do a lot of things like that to speed it up. But yeah, the relic system is definitely the thing that was the most impacted by user feedback.
I'm glad you mentioned like the game being a little hard. That's a good segue to a couple of other questions. I guess the first one is I'm not used to seeing post-game content for a game like Rogue Legacy, because like just getting to the end is a victory in itself. So you're actually putting a lot into Rogue Legacy 2's post-game content. So what does the post-game currently look like, and how are you going to add to it as the updates come along?
So the post-game content is definitely inspired by Hades, right? So right out there, we got a burden system, which is very close to theirs. We were designing something similar, but it was a skill tree. And it was getting so expensive that we were like, oh man, should we scrap this entirely? And then Hades came out, and theirs was just a menu. And we're just, oh man, why were we so stupid, right? So we were definitely inspired by them. But one thing we noticed with Rogue Legacy 1, which we didn't expect, because like this is like one of our first commercial games ever, was how many people would go to like NG10, right? And we knew we wanted to make that experience different for every single run. So we had designed Rogue Legacy 2 since the beginning, and like a lot of it in the engine to scale in a much more dynamic fashion with each one. And like we had in this latest update, you can change the first boss in the game, right, to like a much harder version. And he was in the code, like you could play him if you like ripped it out since the very first launch of the game. Like, that's how long we've been working on, or that's how integrated NG Plus has been for Rogue Legacy 2.
So I want to get into the challenge of optimization, and I know when that first early access build came out, there were like performance issues and a couple of kinks here and there, but you appear to have gotten most of that under control. So what is the challenge in keeping the game optimized from update to update as you continue to add more and more content?
I don't know, because I'm not a programmer, but we did get 2 people on the team, Sean I don't want to put last name wrong. Sean McGrath and Caleb. I'll just say the first name, Sean and Caleb. I don't say their last name. And they just knocked it out of the park. And they just helped us put in a bunch of best practices we're trying to follow. We have a spec which we are trying to. I don't know if we've hit it yet, but more or less all the content that we're adding now, because you usually do optimizations at the very end, right? But now that we've gotten so close and we've put in so much effort, I think we're just going to constantly try and keep to those best practices. And if anything chugs the frame rate down, which just makes development slower, unfortunately, then we have to pull it back, right? And then like go, okay, we can't put it in yet until it's ideal.
As designers of a roguelike, especially one as robust as Rogue Legacy 2 is aiming to be at launch, what is the biggest challenge in making failure fun?
Well, for me, I think, for me, failure fun is as long as people are learning something, or they're doing something different, or they have a goal in mind. If you're not like if you're not learning something, or I would say that if you die and you have to do something repetitive, then it's not fun, right? So being different and being engaging is the most important thing to a roguelike. Which is why we put in teleports and everything, right? Because we want to make hard bosses and stuff, but if you have to find the boss room every single time to fight these bosses, then it becomes unfun, even if you are learning, right? Because the part that you want to learn or the part that you want to discover is so far gated from you. So it's just really giving players a choice to play a game that they can't like fully decide on, fully predict.
And last one for me, I know development has been challenging, especially over the pandemic, but Rogue Legacy 2 seems to be coming along really nicely, and I guess I do want to ask, how close to launch?
I don't know how close to launch because I don't handle that part. We are doing, I believe the goal, and like the goal is always in quotations, is 2 more patches. So 1 patch to get in the last biome, a final patch to get in the ending, and all of the complications that come with it, such as localization and everything, right? But we also have one, because this next patch I think is going to take a little longer, so we have a halfway patch that is planned in like don't know when the release date is, but it's pretty soon. So that's what we're working on now. We've been just changing it up. We have a slightly slower schedule than most. I think we release a major patch every 3 months, right? Which I think the average is like a month and a half or something.
I just want to know, Teddy, obviously the first game cost around $15,000. What's it like having bigger budget for the second game? And like, is it nicer to have more money, more resources to spend to make the game look nicer, add more mechanics, or have longer dev time, stuff like that?
Oh yeah, it's way better. Yeah, the production is the costs are a lot higher. That's always scary. It's always a little frightening, but it also feels good because like me and my brother, we've been in the industry for a while now, and the one thing we didn't want to do was kind of screw people over, right? So like even though we're an indie studio and I think we pay pretty well, right? Like we compare and we're close to a lot of companies, not the super that we could bankrupt if we did, but yeah, it's cool, it's exciting. I'm not sure what else to say.
Well, as a follow-up question, like I mean, like now that you've obviously have a bigger teams and bigger budgets, would it be harder to go back to like the $15K budget or something like that, similar for like a future game, or you think you'd be able to transition pretty flawlessly?
I mean, the 15. So we said it, but it kind of gets lost because of the title. But the 15K wasn't really sustainable, right? It was just me and my brother working, and we didn't pay ourselves, right? Like we more or less. Actually, a lot of the money that we had for the development of Rogue Legacy was from all those Flash games we made prior, right? So we were just not paying ourselves. So 50K, I mean, yeah, we could do it again, totally. I don't think we'd ever want to. But yeah, I would actually love to. I would love to go smaller, but we couldn't go small for Rogue Legacy 2, right? I'd love to go back to the experiments and stuff that we've done. But yeah, it'll be harder because we don't. I love our team. Our team is so awesome. I love working with all of them. So I don't know. It'd be interesting. Like we just make 2 games. I don't know. we don't think that far.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And then the last question I have is basically, when do you and your brother determine when it's the time to just add on content to a game and when to make a full-blown sequel? Like when you guys make that decision?
We make that decision pretty early on. We don't like making content after a game's release. Rogue Legacy is going to be the first one. I mean, we did it for Rogue Legacy 1, but that was just because like there were so many things that there was an unbelievable amount of stuff from Rogue Legacy 1 that was cut. Right? Like there's just so many things. A lot of the things in Rogue Legacy 1 are actually showing up in Rogue Legacy 2. And there's still so much, an unbelievable amount that's been cut from Rogue Legacy 2. But we do think it's like a better game for it. Yeah, I don't know. Whenever we get tired, I guess is when we'll stop adding content to it.